April is here, and for the majority of us in this section of the world, bass fishing is finally back.
Okay, that's what we like to see.
Now, to be totally honest, many different lures and techniques can work during this time of the year, but on this channel, I like to give you guys the highest percentage lures every single month so that y'all can go out there and have success, whether you're a bass boat fisherman, a bank, or anywhere in between. And to make this video even greater, I've got a special celebrity mystery guest that's gonna be joining us to discuss his favorite April lures for where he lives in the center of the country. My name's Tyler, it's April, and let's talk about it. Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all.
I can't believe what I just caught.
Yes! Well, what's going on, y'all? Welcome back to Tyler's Real Fishing. My goal on this channel is to help y'all become better anglers and catch more fish. And we have a different background, a cool background. And for today's April Lures video, we're gonna be talking about bank anglers, boat anglers, kayak stuff, and a little bit of river, smallmouth type of fishing. And for that, we have a special guest. Not only is he a good friend of mine, a man of faith, but he is a Bassmaster Classic champion. He is a multi-time Bass Pro Tour champion. He had some Spanish trophies from, was it Spain?
Italy.
Italy. Spain, Italy, it's all the same. Mr. Ott Lure.
What's up, Tyler?
Is here on the channel. Me and I have been friends for a long time on my 5 years on the Bass Pro Tour, and now he's actually a client of mine, and Taylor behind the camera, I send on the Bass Pro Tour to film their YouTube series called After the Cast.
Yep.
So if you wanna see, it's honestly not a whole lot of fishing content, it's just how pro anglers live their lives on tour, which mostly consists of Dairy Queen runs and homemade biscuit sandwiches. But if that's your kind of thing, I will leave After the Cast down below. I brought Ott on today because A, we're gonna go have a good time on the river catching some fish in, well, by the time this drops, April, but it'll be end of March when we film this. And so he's gonna talk about April from a Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, kind of like central south, although Ohio's not south, but central United States. And I'm gonna talk about the southern April lures from the Texas, Alabama, Florida side of things, because again, that's kind of what we both have experienced. Now, before we get into the first lure, I only feel it's fair to wear an Ott Defoe hat.
I like it.
That I stole from upstairs for this episode.
I'll tell Jenny to inventory that out to you. So. No, that's perfect. I appreciate that.
And so for bait number one, I feel like we should let our guest go first. So Ott, for this region where you live, what is your top April lure?
Yes, my first one, Tyler, would be a small single swim bait. So that little swim bait, just a very simple setup. You know, you've got a jig head, you've got a 3-inch, 3.5-inch. It's kind of, in my opinion, what I'm calling a small swim bait, something that 2 3/4 to 3.5-inch size, something small profile. You know, the versatility part of it comes in the fact that you can put on any size jig head you want. You know, for me in the river out here, it's an 1/8 because the water's shallow. There's not a lot of current right now this time of year. So an 1/8 ounce does what I need it to do. I'm able to fish that bait as deep as I need to, which isn't very deep. And I'm able to fish it, you know, fairly slow because the water is still cool. You go to the lake right now, you might want it on a 1/4 ounce. You might even want it on a 3/8. You know, just depends on the depth that those fish are. So extremely, extremely versatile. This work in a pond, it'll work in a river, it'll work in the lake. Small single swim bait. For me, that's a Bass Pro Speed Shad. That's a 3-inch, that K's Magic or Smallmouth Magic, one of those type of colors.
So why, that's the question I see in my head. Hopefully y'all can see that, and you saw from the B-roll shot, that is more of like a green pumpkin watermelon sort of variation. That wouldn't pop into my head for y'all's area. Why are you choosing that color?
Well, that particular one doesn't have much white on the belly. Some of them are very green and some of them are very white, and I'll use them all.
I see. So you don't think it really matters if you like exactly match the bait fish? Okay.
If it's got a blue back and some white on the bottom, if it's white and some green, if it's a Tennessee Shad, like it's kind of...
Okay, so you heard it here first. Bassmaster Classic champion doesn't really think it matters if it's a little bit of red flake or a little bit of blue flake.
No, especially in something like this, because you're throwing it out there, you're reeling it back. It doesn't feel fast, but it's fast enough.
I got it.
That it's more about the action, it's more about where you put it, it's more about those kind of things, in my opinion.
Exactly.
I do have some, I mean, that Smallmouth Magic where it's got some pearl, it's got some green, that is my favorite, and I think it's a little better. But that being said, honoring my great friend Aaron Martin's, if it's got, I don't count the number of blue flakes in it.
Okay.
You know, that kind of deal.
Wait, did Aaron count the number of blue flakes in it?
That was always the story of, you know, with his robo worms, that this one might not have enough flake in it.
I got it. And as far as line setup for an 1/8 ounce,
Yep.
what are you throwing for your line?
Yeah, pretty much, and it pretty much doesn't matter for me. I'm throwing 10-pound braid,
Got it.
probably a 10-pound leader.
Got it.
You know, if the water's really clear and the fish seem to be really finicky, I might go down to 8, but usually 10 and 10.
And if someone, let's say someone lives in East Tennessee and wants to pond fish in April and they want to throw that out there, would you recommend them casting it and immediately beginning their retrieve, or is it?
Yeah, great question.
Should they let it sink all the way to the bottom? What's the deal there with?
Yeah, really depends on the type of pond you're in, I think. You know, we've got ponds around here that are really flat, a lot of the cow ponds and that type of stuff that have a lot of fish in them.
Yeah.
So you're making a 40, 50-foot cast out away from the bank where you're still in 3 foot of water. So it needs to hit the water, start reeling. But if it's some of the deeper quarry type stuff and the clear water, those fish are probably going to be 8 or 10 foot down. So you might want to throw it out there, give it a 5, 7 second count, then start your retrieve back.
Okay, amazing. So hopefully, if you all live in the area, tie yourself on a standard swim bait and just get to casting and retrieving. So that right there was Ott's #1 lure for this region for the month of April. Mine is a little bit opposite per se than a small finesse swim bait for the South, and that is the topwater frog. Now this frog here, the one you saw in the B-roll shot, is a Spro popping frog. This is not the one that I use. I use the Strike King pad perch or the Mach popping frog. And I'm a big popping frog fan. I know a lot of guys, it's kind of split whether you like a regular, whatever, standard nose or popping. I just feel like I think it's a little more versatile. A popping frog is. And if I'm looking, again, in my videos, to go out there and have a successful day in April, there's still some fish on beds down south, but there's a decent amount of fish that are post-spawn, that are guarding the fry, that have hatched. Some that are just totally done. They're just chilling up shallow.
Shad spawn,
shad spawn as well. And so the best way that I can guarantee catching a fish is getting out there early, casting this thing out on the edge of some grass or on the edge of a laydown.
What about tires? You ever fish tires with it?
I do fish tires in April sometimes. And the biggest reason, like I said, I'm throwing a frog for this time of year is that I just want to consistently know that I can catch a fish early in the morning. And then after that, it's just like it's a big fish sort of thing.
Absolutely.
So you can throw a swim bait up shallow, you can throw a wacky worm, but I just feel like the frog is like, it gets that fish that is crazy aggressive, that may have eaten something else, but if I can catch him on a frog, I'm going to. It's a whole lot more fun. Now, I'm going to throw this back to you for a second. Could, even though the weather's considerably different for the most part down south, I mean, like our fish are halfway done spawning right now, at least in ponds, could a frog work in Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio in April?
Absolutely. I mean, that honestly, my favorite time to fish a frog is about the middle to the 3rd week of April around here. And I've had some epic days with one around here, because the big thing that's happening for our lakes that time of the year, speaking right here in East Tennessee and a lot of other drawdown lakes north of here, Kentucky and other places, they draw them down in the wintertime. So this time of year, our lakes are rising 4 inches, 6 inches, maybe a foot a day.
It's a bunch of new cover for those fish to sit on.
What better place is there to throw a frog?
That's true.
So I have had some absolutely epic days on a frog up here this time of year.
But the reason it's not in your list is because it's not probably the most efficient.
Right.
For the whole, if we're going to go the whole month of April, it's not the most efficient
Absolutely.
for that.
It has its little window where it really plays. And that's kind of it.
But in Texas, the entire month of April, if you don't have a frog on, or in Louisiana, or especially in Florida, the frog bite is really kicking off down there. Big open pad fields, that kind of stuff. And that's why I'm throwing a frog, and I've got it on 50-pound line. I don't throw 65 until I'm going over the slop in the nasty stuff, 50s. 50-pound braid is good enough for me. And as always, the tackle that I talk about, and if I can link Ott's, although it's not Tackle Warehouse, I can put his Bash Pro Shops links down below. But they will be linked down in the video description. Those are affiliate links. So if you could shop using those, it would help this channel continue to grow. So that's my first lure for April. Ott, swinging back to Tennessee. Full-blown pre-spawn, maybe some fish spawning in April. What are you throwing for lure number 2?
Absolutely. My second one, I'm going to go ahead and rig it up right here. So my second choice for the month of April is your shaky head. So a shaky head, a very, very simple bait, and often one that's kind of overlooked anymore.
It is overlooked now.
Nico rig, they want to throw a wacky worm, they want to throw a drop shot, all that kind of stuff. But man, a shaky head still catches fish.
It does.
And it's a really simple thing. And honestly, the simplicity is why I like it. Because when I rig that up, what do I have to get out of the box?
A worm,
and a head.
And a head.
I don't have to get.
It's got the hook
peg
on
the
it.
weight. I got everything.
You don't got to
Worm ahead.
peg it.
Nothing.
Yeah.
I don't have to tie a leader and tie another. Like, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Right there.
That is true.
I'm ready to go. You know.
Yeah.
So the simplicity of that for me, and the efficiency. I mean, fishing in competition like we do, time is money, and you've got to be efficient with your time. So that simplicity is a big part of it.
Yeah.
But for me, that fishing it with a stick worm on it like that is something I do a lot.
Because the finesse worm is what I feel like most people put on a shaky head. So why do you go with a 4.5-inch stick bait?
Yeah, it's a Bass Pro 4-inch sticko is what that one is. It's like a 4 1/4 or something.
Yeah.
That I can a couple things with it. One, I get by with the lighter head because the bait's heavy. Okay, that bait's a bigger profile bait around. And so with a light head, I can actually skip it really well because it has, it's a little bit bigger than like a trick worm style worm.
Got it.
So I feel like it skips a little bit better. But just that, I don't know, man, there's something about that big fat worm that's not terribly long.
Yeah.
That fish just, you get it around their bed and they're extremely aggressive towards it. That smallmouth, largemouth, everything.
Yep. Gotcha.
But yeah, I like the fact that the bait weighs a lot. I don't have to use a lot of weight in the head. And it works really well. And do you use that head from VMC, any of that rugby head?
That looks delicious though.
So rigged with that bait on it,
Yeah.
dude, it is dynamite.
Got it.
Really
Is it like almost a football, kind of?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, you'll see a B-roll shot here, y'all. It's like almost a football head, very finessey football.
So since VMC is from France, they don't have football, they have rugby.
They have rugby. That is true.
That is why it's a rugby head, 100%.
I guess that's hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? I hadn't thought until you mentioned it about the difference in plastic density, and that a lot of the trick worms that are out there are either no salt, like the Strike King finesse one. The key is that you can fling that thing, or they have hardly any salt at all, and so they're hard to cast and they don't sink. And so you're saying with a more salt infused plastic, you can go on lighter head,
correct?
Because the whole thing is kind of heavy.
Exactly.
At that
exactly.
point.
And now, that being said, when you throw it out there and it hits the bottom, it's going to lay on the bottom. Like there is no standing up.
Correct.
There's none of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They bite it, is what I know.
Yeah. A shaky head doesn't have to be a tail sticking up sort of thing, like Jesse Wiggins talks about.
Exactly.
No, it can just be laying on the bottom like a Texas rig, but that is just an effective way to put it together.
It is. It is. And that too, I think that's why I like the light head. Because a lot of your baits do come on the fall, and a lot of the places I'm fishing are fairly steep banks, sloping banks, 45-degree banks. So I'm using a 16th or an 1/8 ounce head. While I pull it, well, then that head's enough to pull it down, and it kind of gives it a glide. And I think that stick worm, being fat like it is, gives a little more glide. That's just a good combination.
And you go with a shaky head over a Texas rig version of the same worm just because of simplicity.
Yeah, largely. There are times I will rig that on a 1/8 or 3/16 ounce Texas rig too. I can't say that I never do, especially if I'm in heavy wood, or if I want to use on a bait caster and I'm in a little heavier cover.
Got it.
I'll the same.
So is that the size worm that maxes out your spinning rod?
I'll do a 5-inch on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do a 5-inch sticko on it too on that head.
Yeah.
But the 4 is my preferred.
Got it.
It certainly is.
And the good thing for y'all is I've got a shaky head masterclass video you can go watch on the channel. I will leave it linked down in the video description. You know what? Here or not, talk about the shaky head. I'm bummed. In March, I didn't throw the shaky head more in my region because it probably would have worked a whole lot more than I throw it. So
no doubt.
That's his lure. Back to the south for lure number 2, and we've got a bluegill version and a baitfish version, and that is the swim jig. Or as my college fishing partner Garrison calls it, the swam jag. And this thing, it catches fish. Now, you've seen in previous videos that I talked about, I didn't fish a swim jig enough over the past few years. I don't know, I got caught up with the frog, or I caught up on the chatterbait or whatever. And I didn't fish a swim jig, and so I've told myself, you know what? This year I'm going to force myself to tie this thing up before I tie on a bluegill swim bait, like a paddle tail or whatever, and just to see if I can fish it in the same areas. And it's worked so far. I don't know if y'all have seen, maybe you've seen the videos, they're on the Uncut channel at this point, but I've gained a lot of confidence in it, and I can't wait to fish it a little more this spring, and especially April is still spring, but in Texas it starts to get hot. So it's really like a post-spawn early summer thing. And so if you've got a shad spawn going on, yes, even in your ponds, it may be less so, but if you get out there early and you've got threadfin shad or especially gizzards in your pond, you can see some flickering going on. And just taking a white swim jig, this here's the Outcast Pro Series swim jig, I put the swim bait upside down. Do you do
That's
that?
no, and
Okay.
I was going to ask you if that was on purpose.
I do this. Come on. That is just because I don't want any additional lift in the bait.
Okay, you don't want lift.
I don't want lift.
Okay.
Because I can just reel this thing faster.
Yeah.
To get
Yeah.
lift. And so if I'm thinking about a shad spawn, yes, I might want lift to keep it up near the top. But a lot of the times in these ponds that are eating bait fish, once that shad spawn ends,
Yeah.
the fish are back to being in 2, 3, 4 feet of water.
Right.
And so I'll put the paddle tail down.
Okay.
Oftentimes though, the reason I didn't put my favorite trailer on here is because I didn't bring any with me. I'll just put a white rage craw on there
Yeah,
because I want the biggest flappiness possible.
Yeah.
But if I do a paddle tail, I'll rig it upside down like this. And if I
Interesting.
want to keep it higher, I can just reel it faster.
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't even matter on a bait with a 3/8 ounce jig head that doesn't provide any lift. But it's just something cool to talk about, and we just spend a minute talking about it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's. I mean, I never, ever do that, but that's something that I'll try in the future.
And now if Ott wins Red Crest next week at
On
Gunnersville
an upside down
on
swim.
an upside down swim jig,
That's where I got it.
Actually, he didn't ask for that information though.
That's right. That's right.
But I think the number one color really for the majority of you guys in the South, who I know tons of y'all fish ponds that watch this channel, is probably not a white swim jig. It's probably a green pumpkin bluegill colored swim jig. And that's because your ponds, majority of them have bluegill or pumpkin seed or sunfish, whatever you call them. And they are either eating the eggs off the bass's nest, or they have created the bluegill spawn has happened.
right.
They've created nests of their own, and the bass are chilling off to the edge, coming up to ambush bluegills as they spawn. And so a green pumpkin swim jig is just a really good one for this time of year. And I'm guessing that a bluegill swim jig is really good in the second half of April where you live.
Oh yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
it absolutely is. And that for me, like it's really May here before we go to the white one.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of when our shad spawn typically kicks off.
Got it.
But yeah, if I'm throwing a swim jig this time of year, it's a dark color. You know, green pumpkin orange, a black and blue with if the water's super muddy. But yeah, most likely some variation of green pumpkin with something brighter, some chartreuse, some orange, something else going on.
Oh, so you
with
add
it.
a little bit of chartreuse in there.
I like a little bit of, not a lot, but a little bit, because I mean, a lot of bluegill have some yellow, they have some orange, they have some red,
That's
so,
true.
I mean, having the bulk of it be green pumpkin and, that kind of stuff, or some blue, but then a little bit of undertones, especially on the bottom side.
You know what? I need to do a better job of dipping my tails in chartreuse or not feeling the need to totally match the trailer to the bait. I've got the Outcast Jackpot jig that just launched. I love this thing. Ott and I are both with VMC, and it's got a VMC red line in it, which is just the best dang hook out there.
It really
so
is, yeah.
excited about this jig in the future. But that is my second one. We're gonna head back for Ott's third, which I can just see it on the deck in my peripheral vision, is a special bait in his history, his lifestyle here in Tennessee. What is that bait?
Yep, and so the last one up is a small crankbait. So a small crankbait. So for me, that's something that, it's a bait that, I designed. It's a bait that I've made for a long, long time. And just that in and of itself makes it something that I love to fish with.
And that might have glossed over people that are just, doing dishes as they listen to this. You said you've made for a long time.
Yeah.
Explain the process. What you made crankbaits?
Oh yes, I have. I mean, from the time I was a freshman in high school was when I started making crankbaits. Buying sheets of balsa wood. For me, the rounded part I do with the router. I used a drill press. Okay. Like I used other tools along the way.
I got you. So making your own baits led you to going to Rapple and saying, hey, or maybe they came to you and they said, hey, can we make your baits?
Yeah. No, I went to them and I had. I'd shown them baits that I'd made, because that was, for me, Rapple was the perfect fit when I got sponsored by them. 2012 was the first year that I was sponsored by them, because I loved balsa. Balsa crankbaits, that's East Tennessee, North Carolina, that's what we use here. So I loved the fact that I'd caught bukus of fish on the Shad Rap. My first 5-pound bass, my first 7-pound bass were on the Rapple Shad Rap. So it was an honor to get to work with a company that I had used the baits for so long and that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, right out of the gate, I'm like, hey, I make balsa crankbaits like I have for, a number of years at this point in time. And it took a while. It was honestly after I won the Classic that it was finally like, hey, let's do this. Got it. But that was a catalyst that drove that. But yes, fishing a small crankbait, and April's kind of towards the end of that window of to me, small crankbait, cooler water, and really, especially north of here, it's still going on pretty good.
Okay.
But even in East Tennessee, our region right here, you're kind of getting towards the tail end of it.
I see.
You know,
But if we're talking Ohio, Pennsylvania,
absolutely,
New York.
you're right in the heat of it.
Got it.
You
Cool.
know, but from everything north of here. Because, in my opinion, it's a deal that shines from the upper 40 water temperatures to the 50s, mid 50s, you know, even in the low 40s, especially the further north you go, it seems like the colder water it's effective in.
Got it.
You know, around here, it's really like 45, 48 is kind of where it really gets good. And then 50 to 52, 54 is where it, you know, the peak of it is. But further north you go, that window, in my opinion, is a little lower. But yeah, just, you know, it depends on where you're at. It depends on if, you know, good chance of catching fish on it in the river. You know, you're going to be cranking it around shoals if you're on a lake. Riprap is always good, but you know, rocky top banks, it's got some slope to them. You know, in a pond, it's really just about keeping it from getting slimed up a lot of times.
Correct.
That's the problem with the crankbait in a pond.
Yes, it is.
You know, so keeping
That's
your
why
rod tip
lipless is
high.
probably the best crankbait for a pond.
You can control the depth. You know? But a lot of that in a pond becomes, you know, rod tip angle, speed of your retrieve, how pause in the bait, and that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
You know, so those kind of things. But
And with a small shallow diving crankbait, are you like a line connoisseur where it's like, if I throw 8, I can get this depth? Or are you just like a 15 across the board, doesn't really matter what your line pound test is?
I'm pretty much, the bait determines what size I'm going to use. So like tiny, with that Rapala tiny, it's 12.
Okay.
I will, like very rare occasions, if it's really heavy cover, I'll go to 14.
Okay.
But I'm throwing it on a bait caster. Personally, I'm just not going to throw it on 10.
I see.
Or
I
any
see.
less.
I got you. So 12 is kind of your crankbait line in general.
It really is.
Okay.
Yeah, 12 and 14.
So that's odds 3. My last one for the month of April, and especially if you live in like a super grassy, and we're going to talk about it a little bit, snot grassy sort of place, is a soft plastic worm, but I still want to be moving if I have the chance to. I want to be casting and retrieving, not just casting and hopping, and that is this worm right here. That is the swimming worm. Now, the good thing about this worm is that if the swimming part gets chomped off or falls off, it's just a stick bait. I mean, it's literally almost the same as the stick bait that Ott had on here. So you can actually go Texas rig, flip it around, and put it on a shaky head. So you can double, if you're trying to save money here, double it up. But the reason why I love a swimming worm is because you can rig it on a wide gap or a straight shank hook, peg your weight, and you can be really efficient with picking apart areas. So if you're in a pond, you can make one loop around. You can cast at every target early in the morning with a swimming worm, and then if the fish slide off the bank a little more, you can then cast on the edge of the grass, and then if they're chilling off near the fountain in the middle of the pond, you can just cast it way out there and either slowly reel it or work it just like a standard worm does and just hop it off the bottom. I've never Nico rigged or wacky rigged a swimming worm. I mean, maybe somebody out there could. I'm sure it would be cool. But the Strike King cutter worm is my favorite. I think it's a 6-inch. They make a 6 and a 7. 7 is just a little more bulky. Bigger bass in your pond would like the 7's good. But would you say the swimming worm was like developed in Florida? Is that the...
You know, the Zoom Speed Worm was the first one.
Correct.
And if you remember, it actually was just a full paddle tail.
Oh, was it really?
As far as our generation, you know, there was the Producto worm.
Oh, so it had a worm with a paddle tail on it.
Well, it was, you know, I mean, it was a speed worm tail, right?
Oh, yeah, the speed worm
but it didn't
tail.
have the cut in it.
Oh, I see.
When they called the Ultra Vibe Speed Worm. So the original Speed Worm was just that rounded, bubbly kind of, like a beaver tail.
Yeah, beaver tail, yeah.
It's basically what it looked like.
Okay.
Well, then in Florida, then there was a Gambler one too that was actually the Gambler Flapping Shad.
Okay.
Actually, now that we're doing the history lesson.
Is that the original?
That was more of the original.
Okay.
It was a Gambler Flapping Shad.
Got it.
So it looked like a fluke, but it had basically pretty similar to a speed worm.
Yeah.
And that's what those guys would do, is they would take that and cut a notch out of it, so that, because that Flapping Shad or the original speed worm, it would pop, 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 and then it would just die. Like you'd lose the water on it, and then it would die. You cut that notch in it, it was extremely consistent. It would swim the whole way back.
Okay.
And so then that was when they did the speed worm. Then they did the Ultra Vibe Speed Worm, which is all we know now. I don't know if they make the original Speed Worm.
Correct.
But then the cutter worm, you know, they kind of did the rage tail, and that's if I throw a swimming worm right now.
Exactly. And so lots of options. I love filming with other people, especially the older gentlemen. Even though Ott's only 39, they know the history and the stuff that I don't know about these lures. But again, the swimming worm is extra crucial to have for me during this time of year, because the hotter it gets, that snot grass, that filamentous algae, as Stephen Barton says, I'm sure even later on in your area in April, it just starts to bloom. And y'all know out there, I'm sure some of y'all just started fishing this spring, and you're like, Tyler, I can't get this junk off of my line.
That right there's the way to do it.
And so if you want a pretty much foolproof way to, unless you let it sit on the bottom and you drag it too much, just put a 16th ounce or maybe an 1/8 ounce weight at a max on this thing. I usually say let your baits get to the bottom.
Right.
A swimming worm, unless you're making a long cast out there, don't do that. Let it sink halfway, like know how fast it falls, let it sink halfway, and then reel it back in. And you're gonna get a lot more casts back to you without stuff on it. And could you catch more if you were like that much closer to the grass? Possibly, but you're gonna also wreck a lot of casts. And so that's why I swim a worm around. That way you can have a good soft plastic presentation that fish want this time of year, especially around bluegill beds. Same reason I throw the swim jig. It's just this is a lot more weedless than a swim jig is. And
I'm gonna give you a little tip on that swim worm, especially in those scummy, snot grassy situations. And you can use it on a swim jig, you can use it on anything. This will help you with the efficiency part of it. We're always guilty when we're, it's what we do as fishermen. Like that's what we're supposed to do in most situations. We take and we cut that tag of our line tie real short.
Okay.
Right? I tie a uni knot. What do you tie?
Palomar.
Okay, so you got one little tag that sticks like that,
correct.
Right? Well, that even under a Texas rig weight, unless it's so short, which you probably don't want it to be, that your weight is actually covering it. You've got that little barb sticking out like this to catch the grass. Leave that long. Leave it about 1 inch long, because then it lays back in line with the bait and it doesn't catch the grass. Anything that gets on will just slide off.
Leave your tag in 1 inch long.
Leave it.
Taylor behind the camera is loving this right now because he leaves his tag ends long all the time.
Oh, I hate it. But in this particular situation, it actually works.
Wow. And it works to repel it, or just that it when the snot grass gets on it,
it slides off.
It slides off.
Because it's not stuck on that little barb.
I'm going to have to give that an intentional try, which then again goes to show you that the fish, like your tag end doesn't matter how long it is. The fish don't care. They can't see it. It's 10-pound line anyways. But that is very interesting, and that is a sneaky tip that you're only going to get here on Tyler's Reel Fishing. So that is a swimming worm. That is our 3 lures. Any other honorable mentions that come to mind for Tennessee?
Yeah, absolutely. Honorable mention number 1 would be a wake bait.
Okay.
Some type of wake bait, because when those fish are pre-spawn and just starting to spawn, and then even post-spawn, a wake bait is really, really good around here. And that's especially, I feel like on our smallmouth, you catch a lot of smallmouth that are on a bed. On a wake bait. They're sure enough on a bed, but if you reel that thing across them nice and slow, and a bigger single swim bait's kind of the same deal.
Okay. A wake bait and a 5-inch swim bait have kind of the same vibe.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. And then I'd say honorable mention for me, I call it the Skunk Buster on my channel, and that's just a soft plastic jerk bait, just a Strike King caffeine shad, weightless. Twitch, and just let it fall.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care if it's 10 feet deep, let it fall, because oftentimes those fish will get in a weird post-spawn funk. And I make videos about that all the time, though, so that's why I didn't include it in today's list. But if you're not throwing a soft plastic jerkbait during this time of year, you are missing out for sure on that. So,
because letting it sink out there in 10 foot of water, you're catching those scope fish you can't see.
That is true. You are blind scoping, as we say.
Blind scoping, yep.
Well, we're going to get on the water and catch some smallmouth. And then we're going to go fish up. I'm bringing this guy pond fishing, everybody. Bringing a pro pond fishing.
Even Parker's going to come with us, I think.
We're going to have a good, maybe give Taylor a rod, although he's working, so maybe not. But if you want to check out Ott's channel, I'll leave it below. And by the time this drops, Red Crest is either going or it's on the way.
Yeah.
And so MLF's live stream will be going of Red Crest. Of course, I want one of my friends to win it, so hopefully it's Ott or it's Alton or Andy or somebody. Yeah. But thanks for joining the video today. If y'all want to watch the Uncut bass fishing day me and Ott are going to do together, it won't be out right now, but when it does drop, it will be on his channel.
Wow, sweet.
It'll be over his face on the screen there. I guess you could put it on your channel. No, it'll be on his face to click, but right now it'll just be a link to the Uncut Bass Fishing channel. And if you want to watch my swimming worm masterclass whammy, it'll be over my face. But thank y'all so much for watching. It's a pleasure as always. Thank you to Ott.
Absolutely.
And we'll see y'all next time right here on TRF.